Okay, a slightly different video today. I'm not on site with my camera filming things as I do it. Reason for this is the combination of an 18-month-long project that I've been doing in the background. What we're talking about today is how I came up with the invention of some custom cowl scaffolding. Cowls are the white pointy bits on top of oast houses that you see across the UK. These buildings originally were agricultural buildings used for the drying of hops that are used for making beer. You find them across the southern counties of the UK and in the Midlands, and they're called either kiln or oast houses, depending on which part of the country you're in. And in the Midlands, where this one is, they're pointy, and in the southern parts of the UK, they're flat on the top. But basically a large, white, conical wooden chimney, effectively, that sits on the top of the properties. And the way that they work is that we'll have a look at a screen in a moment that shows you actually the plans of the designs. But originally they were used to work as a venturi chimney to draw warm air up through the floors in the building. So on the lower floors, they would have a furnace or fire. Then on the upper floors, they would lay the hops that they collected from the fields. In fact, the field that you can see on the right-hand side behind the building was where hops were grown. And then they were laid down after they were picked and left to dry inside the different floors of the oast houses. And this is purported to be the largest oast house in Europe. So there are four very large oast chimneys, and it'd been converted into properties about 20 years ago. Now, the cowls on top stand about 3 meters above the top of the property, so about 16, 17 meters in total from the ground. So very high up, very large and very heavy. And the problem is they need maintaining. They're wood and they're out in the open. So how do you get up to do that? Well, it gets very expensive to do, and they have to be done reasonably often because they don't last forever. So the problem is a lot of property owners no longer keep them on their houses. You can drive through this area and see the buildings, the shape, but without the traditional cowls on top, because the owners just can't afford to maintain them, and they either let them fall down, rot away and fall down, or they have them removed and never to go back up there. So in an effort to preserve the history and the heritage, it's how do you make something more economic to maintain. So this was kind of the brief. Now, the cowl itself, the ones that are on that property were made by Dude Narnett, so reference them. This is their imagery, not mine. This shows a rough plan as to how it works. So there's part of the cowl sits inside the roof, so about 2 meters below the top part of the roof where the tiles finish. There's a pivot area to allow the cowl to turn in the wind, and then it has what's traditionally sort of referred to, I believe, as a finger that comes out to the side, and that is pushed around by the wind around the cowl, and that puts the back of the cowl facing the wind and the open area against the wind, and that is what creates a venturi effect. As the wind rushes past the cowl, it pulls air from inside the chimney, the building, out, so it takes the heat up past the oasts, and that helps dry them. So that's traditionally how they would operate. These designs have been around for a good few hundred years and have barely changed in their design. It's quite niche, so there's only a few people that actually manufacture and maintain these, and they're quite expensive to get done. And they're on non-commercial properties these days because modern hop farms use different techniques for drying them. Now, this particular property unfortunately had a fire about 2012, something around that sort of time, and the entire top of the building was taken off, and some of the other parts of the building were badly damaged. Now, that gives us an interesting insight into the rebuild process and what goes on. I'm pleased to say nobody was harmed, just loss of possessions and a lot of problems for everyone that lived there, but out of the ashes rose a new building, which was even better than it was originally. Now, that was after it was finished. You can see the entire roof from where the cowl was completely disappeared, everything, and collapsed into the inside. And over 2 years, that building was rebuilt. As we can see here, we've got some engineers who are actually building the new roofs. You'll see how aggressive the pitch is on that on those roofs. It's about 70%. And you can see the builder on the left-hand side stood in what I refer to as the cowl room, which is the bit at the top where the 2 meter pivot bar sits. And over a couple of years, they rebuilt those and had new cowls made by Dude Nonnet, who the plans were shown a few moments ago. These two gentlemen were part of the team that came to install them. So they're good 6-footers, these gentlemen. So you get the idea of just how tall the cowls are. They're also very heavy, best part of about 400 or so kilos. So getting it up that high, sort of 15, 16 meters up in the air, and lowering them into the position so that they turn without fouling the building is quite an engineering task, and not one you want to repeat particularly often. So the access to getting the cowls up, off, and maintained really has 3 different options that are available. The traditional route is, traditional route, I would say the more common route that's these days is craning them on and off. Then you have cherry pickers that large ones can get close enough to the building to get you up, and then the scaffolding. And they actually work out about the same sort of pricing, but they're different options. The craning one, if you go for an insured managed hire, so that means if they drop it, it's their problem to repair. That's expensive. It's typically $3,000 a day to take it off, and then $3,000 a day to put it back on. But you could do potentially all 4 cowls on that building in the one day and then paint them at your leisure. So that would be the usual route. It would typically require a 40-ton crane because of the access to the building isn't fantastic, so you can't get really close, so you have to have something that can lift all the way over the building. Cherry pickers can get a bit closer, but to get one that can go the height, the distance, and then down to do the cowls at the far end, you're looking about £1,500 a day and probably about 4 days per cowl to do the painting and sanding and what have you that would need to be required. So you're still looking at £6,000 for that. Scaffolding, a bit cheaper, but $3,000 to put it up, and I was quoted about $3,000 for the painting and repair work to be done because it's going to be done at height. So either way, you're broadly looking at about a £6,000 job to get up there to do the painting. And that's never going to get cheaper. Those costs will continue to go up, and those costs are excluding UK VAT, which is running at 20%. Excluding VAT, is running at 20%. So not a cheap option. So where do you go from there? Well, once I got up and had a look at the cowls, and I was up and down into these for quite some time, doing a lot of measurements and having a look, we can see the real world version of what was shown in the plans earlier. So you've got the horizontal finger bar that effectively helps the cowl turn, and we can see the pivot in the middle on the vertical. And then we can see, I think they're called fingers, this kind of skirt that goes around the edge of the cowl. We can see how that just clips the top of the leaded area of the roof and then skirts around to keep the weather, or the worst of the weather, out of the cowl room. The cowl room is a waterproofed room and sealed and what have you, with drains in there. So it doesn't matter if rain does get in, but ideally you don't want it as a big open hole particularly. So that's what we're dealing with. What I came up with about 18 months ago or so was a plan of trying to fit a permanent or semi-permanent platform up there using the cowl room, so we could put some scaffolding structure inside the room to brace something that will be on the outside, and whether that was accessed through periodic sort of roof ladders, or whether we had a platform up there or handrails or whatever. This was the sort of thing we were trying to figure out how we would work on this so that we could maintain the cowls. Now, this drawing isn't quite accurate because the cowls are not a perfect conical shape. They're actually slanted away so that an angle at the back. So they're a bit off center and a slightly different angle. There'll be a mathematical term for what that is. If I can remember what it is, I'll put it up in the description. But either way, it's not quite as clear cut as this. But this was what I was sort of looking at conceptually and using traditional scaffolding components. But I searched high and low, couldn't really find anything. I then happened to stumble across Euro towers. And I spent a couple of weeks looking at these pictures thinking this is so close to what we want. And I got in touch with them and spoke to Paul Ludlow and his team of engineers run by Chris. And we discussed taking the towers that they already supply to the UK hire industry and modifying those to fit onto a cowl. So with a bit of engineering exercise over about a period of 3 months, we did a sort of trial and error process of measuring, test fitting, trials, etc., which involved Paul coming to site and helping me measure things up. And what we were able to prove over time was that these things would work. We can see that they're designed for typically used on domestic properties or small commercial properties where you have a much shallower pitch versus what we've got on the cowls, but they will go up to 70-degree pitch, and I needed about 67 degrees. So we were kind of, okay, this will work so let's try it out. So what I'll do is I'll cut to a couple of the videos so you can see what we were measuring up. Then, as you can see on site in the valley gutters where I spent a lot of time, we've got one of their ladders that we were measuring up against the pitch of the roof to make sure that that would fit. And then we would try to get the key piece, which was the ridge hanger, to set. So the ridge hanger itself is the bit that goes over the top of the edge. So on the chimney scaffolding, it goes over the ridge, hence the name ridge hanger. And it will support a ladder down both sides. And what we were trying to do was modify one to fit on the inside of the cowl. So we did CAD mock-ups. Then we made a model that was actually life size but made with drainage pipes, so £50 worth of parts from B&Q, and then go and measure it all up, cut it and fit it. And then we bought up a real ridge hanger to check that we could physically get it into the cowl, because all the components had to be pulled up from outside or inside the property. We didn't want to put scaffolding up to put the scaffolding up. That would have defeated the object to a certain degree. So we wanted to make things small enough that was man portable and could be hauled into the inside of the cowl if necessary. So that's where we were doing most of the work to try and figure out to make sure that this would all fit. Okay, right, back up in the cowls. Right, so we put the bracket back on, and we have raised the edges, so that's more than enough to clear. So we've gone up 4.5 inches at the bottom, so let's raise that up. It's all positioned back in, so it's quite high at the back. So as we can see, we've got a huge height at the back, and then at the front we've got plenty of space to allow for a bit of a wobble
and plenty of clearance.
Yeah, plenty of clearance as it goes round, so it won't catch it. Right, so that's the hope. Right, now this was what we eventually came up with. This was one of the platforms, and as you can see, the angle there is exactly the same as the pitch on the cowls, and then we've got a flat platform on there to work from, and there's a bit of a playing around and adjustment to be done, and we had to work out the logistics of how we would not only get it up there but also how we would assemble it at height, because you want to do things very, very safely. So you rehearse things on the ground numerous times, make sure that everyone's got their PPE stuff clipped in, you've got safety number one and all that type of thing. So we could see that by using lightweight aluminium components, it was going to be man portable. And then it was a case of figuring out the best way of actually getting stuff up onto the cowl, into the cowl, in what order to assemble it. So we had to figure out the logistics of the operations as well as just the engineering task of making the components as well. Day of the installation ended up being one of the hottest days of the year in the UK. So I managed to give myself a spot of heat stroke whilst doing it, but we got 2 assembled in the afternoon. All right, next one. So cover the velluxes, ladder, then these things are hauled up on the outside, like sledged up the tiles on basically ratchet straps or strong rope would do, and then they're pulled up and then inside the cowl. So there's the 3-rung ladder that sits on the inside, so you can climb out and then onto there. And then it's this unit, which is the ridge hanger, so they're clipped together and braced. And then it's this one, which is the outside support rungs, which sits flush against the tiles. And then it's the last bit, which is the platform and the rails.
Able to start painting. Bloody hell, it feels really rock solid.
It does, doesn't it?
It feels amazing. Yeah. Completely trust this. Absolutely delightful. Not moving anywhere. Not at all. Absolutely feel like I can trust this. I don't even feel like I'm yourself. You have to edit that bit out. It doesn't feel like it's a dangerous place to be. It genuinely doesn't feel like it's a dangerous place to be. You're absolutely good. Gosh, that is such a relief. Wow.
A lot cheaper than normal scaffolding.
And you can see them nice and shiny and assembled there and hooked on top and safely taking, they're rated to 175 kilos. So easily take a person in there. You can double stack them. So there is the option of putting another platform above that. If you want to go the extra height as well, it will go double that height. So you just have effectively another 6 foot. So the platform would be about halfway up the cowl. That's not necessary in these ones because these cowls, the bulk of the work is done at the lower area and the cowl tips away as well when you're facing the side. So you don't have to get up to quite that high, but you can go double height if you wanted to. And these units are done as a permanent fixture, but they can be removed, so they're demountable. So the side rails and toe boards that are there didn't have to be installed, but the fingers do turn around on top of it. So the decision was made on these properties to leave those sidebars in place. They do unclip and can be put inside the cowls for safekeeping if people wanted a slightly less visual profile for the towels. But because there's 2 on this property and they're nice shiny bits of equipment, they look engineering, so they kind of match with the rest of the property. From the ground, they look like that. So again, you've got the option to leave the handrails on if necessary. And from the side, typically they look like that. So you can't really see them from the public access parts of the property, but because there's more than one on there, they look pretty symmetrical and look like they're meant to be there. Now, the wonderful thing is, for a lot less than the cost of normal scaffolding, about half the price of normal scaffolding, temporary scaffolding that is, they've now got permanent access to the building, so they can get up there and just hire a painter and decorator, albeit perhaps a brave one, but it's a lovely place to work on a sunny day. They can then stand up there and work on sanding and painting the cowls. The inside of the cowls you can get at normally anyway, so you don't need specialist equipment to get to that, but they can now stand on the exterior and then turn the cowl around and work on the back side of it to do repair work if necessary. So that would prolong the life of the cowls that are already there and also encourage the owners to sort of maintain the aesthetic looks of the property, and push come to shove, those platforms can be removed partly or fully if necessary, but they're designed to last there indefinitely. So a wonderful little project, and as I say, about 18 months of head scratching and engineering, and on to paint is the next project. So nice little one. Hope you enjoyed the explanation, learned a little bit, and hopefully you enjoyed the videos. If you like more of this sort of weird and wonderful content, do like and subscribe. I've got channels with all sorts of stuff on there, from vehicle maintenance and custom car projects to property projects and things like this, but not the usual stuff. So hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you very much.